Hey friends, it's HearthMath here, host of this podcast, Our Power is Within, and I'm on a mission to inspire people to take their power back and help people to realize that each and every one of us has a healer within our own self. When we can create an environment that supports healing and get out of our own way, we are truly capable of healing in mind, body, and soul. If you are enjoying the content from this podcast and the guests that I have had on the show, please take a moment to click the subscribe button so you have every new episode waiting for you in your podcast library. Some other ways that you can help support this podcast are taking a moment to leave a 5-star rating and a quick review on Apple Podcast, and of course, share your favorite episode with a friend or on your social media and tag me at Our Power is Within. I would really love to know how this past week's challenge went for you with a partner eye gazing. Shoot me a DM or an email and let me know what came up for you. This week's challenge is body gratitude. And I am hoping that after all that time that you spent staring into your own beautiful eyes 2 weeks ago, that it helped you to recognize what is absolutely amazing and perfect and beautiful about your body already. I encourage you to choose something that you are truly grateful for with your body and savor in that gratitude. Maybe you love your big brown eyes, or your bright, cheerful smile, or even think your tiny toes are adorable. Whatever it is, just find something on your physical body that you adore and adore yourself a little more this week than you likely usually do. And please remember that you are worth it. We all are. Our guest today is Tessa Malcarne. Wow, you guys, what a treat. I am excited to share this episode. I had such a fun time chatting with Tessa and I loved her insights. She has her own healing story, and then through her own experiences, she went on to become a DNRS coach, supporting other people on their journeys as well. And now she's actually shifted into being an independent coach. And at this point, she has many years under her belt supporting people through chronic pain and illness recovery. She has some really wonderful insights that she shares with us today that I feel are a true treat for all of us. We had a lot of fun, so we actually plan on doing a part 2 sooner than later, so stay on the lookout for that. Oh, and my squishy face snoring bulldog makes a guest appearance in today's episode. As you may hear, some of her soft, soothing snoring, or as I like to call it, her purring, in the background. She was sound asleep next to me, keeping me warm while Tess and I had chatted away. So, anyhow, enjoy today's episode. All right, Tessa, thank you so much for being here with me and everyone listening today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, absolutely. Side note for anyone listening, this is kind of fun, and I'll tell you too. Tessa, at one point, was a DNRS coach, and she was actually my very first DNRS coach for one session before she went on maternity leave. And Tessa, I wanted to share with you something fun about that, and I'll let everyone listening hear it. I was thinking of this earlier, how you gave me, it was like, it might have seemed like some of the simplest advice, but it's crazy how much it transformed things for me, because I was not really doing well with the little random goofy distraction mechanisms they gave us, like the counting and things like that.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted a tool to use when I started kind of, having my mind run wild and go into like all the what if modes. And you were like, oh, well, is there something else you can focus on? Like maybe, I don't remember exactly what you said, but we came up with like if you could, maybe you want to paint a room, or you want to remodel something, or you're looking for new curtains.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I ended up running with this, and it was so wonderful. And I ended up with this beautiful room all said and done. Many months later, I literally installed these beautiful shelves, and I made my own bed, and then I would visualize and envision like what I wanted the walls to look like and the color of my bedspread and all the things.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it was like months and months process, but it really was the perfect distraction. Like I
Oh,
would want to shift to that because it excited me. And I think I wanted to bring it up because I actually think it was a huge catalyst for me to feel well faster because I mean, I was outside literally building a bed and doing things but it was exciting and it was fun and I was looking forward to it. So yeah, I just wanted to share because you probably being that we never had another session, you never knew that impact it
right.
had.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool. These are the kinds of stories that I think I don't hear often, but hopefully they happen. And just to hear that, it warms my heart. So thank you. That's really neat.
Of course.
Really cool story.
Yeah. So for everyone who is listening, I would love, I obviously already made mention that at one point you were a DNRS coach. For people who are or aren't familiar with DNRS, one has to actually go through their own healing experience and be on the other side in order to be a DNRS coach. And now you've moved away from that and you are still coaching in some capacity, but you aren't actually a coach for DNRS. And so I would love if you would just share a little bit about your background, your story, what you've overcome, and where you've, where you've gotten today and what you're up to.
Sure, absolutely. So, to date back to when my whole perfect storm happened, I developed an imbalance in my nervous system when I was in my early 20s. But I started having anxiety when I was really young. I remember having my first anxiety attack when I was 8. So, and that's not an atypical story. I hear that all the time from my clients. So, for the many years in between being a child and an adult, I experienced pretty severe ups and downs within my nervous system. Times when my nervous system was able to cope well, and times when it wasn't. And that is another very common story that I hear with a lot of my clients. So I had times where I felt incredible, and other times where anxiety controlled me in every way possible. I played soccer in college. I traveled. I had fun with friends and family. So from the outside, it seemed like I was this average teenager / young adult. But on the inside, there was a lot going on, and only I could see it. And most of it, I didn't even understand myself. So I moved to Italy, which was kind of cool, to teach science at an American school. I was in my mid-20s, and that's when my nervous system decided it had had enough. You've been priming me since you were 8 years old, and now it's time. It's time for me to lose my resilience, is basically what happened. So the resilience of my nervous system then kind of hit an all-time low and refused to bounce back. And that's what like DNRS would call the tipping point. So the resilience of the nervous system is what allows a person to have these highs and lows over many years. We can experience traumas and stressors, and we can bounce back. The nervous system has this built-in incredible resilience, and I'll talk about this more later, but once a person has had so many prolonged stressors and traumas over time, the nervous system gets to this point where the stress is just too much. So I reached that point, and I was in a country far, far away. At this point, I had many sensitivities. You name them, I had them. And pretty much every other symptom that someone with a nervous system imbalance would see. Like, I really had the full laundry list. And my clients will come to me and say, did you have this? Did you have that? And honestly, I don't even remember all of the symptoms that I had because there were so many. But usually my answer is, yep, had that. Yep, I went through that too. Yep, I noticed that as well. So I don't think I need to name them unless you want me to, but I pretty much had them all.
No, but did they all like onset at once during this tipping point, or was it kind of like this slow build?
So interesting. So I noticed chemical sensitivities actually when I was like a kid. I used to hate when my mom sprayed her perfume, and I look back at that and I'm like, oh wow, that was a sign that my nervous system was being triggered by that. But then I went through periods of time where like that wouldn't bother me and I could wear perfume when my nervous system had more resilience. So I would say that for the most part, it was kind of this cascade of symptoms where it started with one thing which led to more. And of course, I had no idea what was going on with me, as most people who get to this place have no idea. And so the stress of that, just not knowing what's wrong with you, and for doctors to say, you're healthy, you're fine, look at your charts, like look at your numbers that we just ran, you're perfectly healthy, you're fine, it's all in your head. It's just anxiety. It feels demeaning. I felt shamed at times. And I felt like everyone around me was questioning what was wrong with me, right? And then you start to feel lonely and feel like an outsider. And so yeah, to answer your question, it started with like one thing and then led to a bunch of other things. So my life went on like that for many years. And like I said, when we add on the stress, we pour on the stress because we don't know what's wrong with us. Well, that just leads to feeling more symptomatic. So anyway, things kept going on like that for many years. I actually don't record how long it was. I never kept tabs on time, which I think is a good thing. And I tell my clients, like, don't keep tabs on time. You don't need to. Your healing is going to happen, but trying to figure out how long it's been, know exactly how many months it's been, it's not going to help us to get there. So it was probably like 4 or 5 years that things went on like that for me. And I started putting the pieces together when I noticed that the severity of my symptoms directly coincided with my level of stress. It was like, there's something going on here. Like I know I'm onto something. So I did a lot of research. I found the DNRS program, and it really opened my eyes to what was going on inside of me. And at that time, it had been, I don't know, 20 years that it had been going on, maybe a little bit longer. So I used parts of that program to heal myself. But what I really attribute the majority of my healing to is my own research and my own understanding of what was going on inside of my brain and inside of my limbic system, inside of my nervous system. So I really used the science behind what was happening to deeply understand why every little thing was happening in my brain and body. And I thought that was very powerful to me, and we'll talk more about that later too. But I could see that my brain and body were communicating with me. And I wanted to learn and understand that language. And so I really started listening, and I got to a place where I felt like all the pieces really clicked together. And I started to no longer fear my symptoms. I started to believe that I could live a normal life for the first time really ever. And so then I started really doing that with all of the science in the back of my mind at all times. It was actually, I shouldn't say it was in the back of my mind. It was on the front of my mind. It was right there all the time. Whenever I went anywhere, I had that knowledge in my brain. And like I said, we'll talk about that more in detail later. And so then I feel like I started kind of assimilating back into society more in a healthy way. I never limited myself. I always tried to live life. But we're limited. You know what that's like to be with a group of friends, but to feel so insecure or have so much anxiety that you're not present. And so then I felt like I was finally living life again. And so then I started coaching. Like you said, I started coaching for DNRS for about 5 years. And then since then, for about a year and a half, I am coaching for myself, and really loving that I get to help this community of people who really inspire me every day to just keep going and love what I'm doing. So that's the background.
And you said 5 years plus?
That I coached for DNRS.
Wow, okay. So it's been a long time.
Yeah, it has been.
Do you feel like now you still have things sometimes show up, but you're able to like mitigate it faster, or do you really just not have things show up?
Things definitely show up, but I don't want that to worry people. I want to explain that in detail because I think that could easily trigger somebody to think, oh my gosh, I'm never going to heal. Like there's no such thing as a full recovery. No, there absolutely is. But stress happens in everybody's life, and we're constantly evaluating and reevaluating how we're working through that stress, the tools that we have to cope. So things like stressful events will happen. For example, my baby, who's 20 months old now, has never slept through the night. He nurses all night long, every night since birth. And some days I was exhausted. It's gotten a lot better because I've learned different ways to work through it. But some days I was just totally exhausted. And that's hard on the body. That's hard on the brain. So, things like that show up, and little bits, like I'll notice a little bit of anxiety creeping in. But because I've gone through it, I feel I am so well equipped to notice that anxiety, to be able to observe where it's coming from, and to figure out the best ways possible to mitigate it. And if I had never gone through what I have gone through in my life, I never would have those tools. I wouldn't have the self-reflection. I wouldn't have the awareness. So I look back and I'm actually truly grateful for what I've gone through. And that's something that I talk to clients about when they feel really like beaten down and discouraged by all they've gone through. And, one conversation I always have with them is, I promise you, when you get to the other side of this, when stressful things happen in life, you will handle them better than anybody around you. Do you think that's true for yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I say all the time how grateful I am, because when I look around at just the world and other people in it, I feel so grateful because it was in what we've gone through that teaches us and expands our mind and opens us up to so much that we would have otherwise possibly never learned or explored. And yeah, I feel like I have tools, that I didn't have those before. And I feel like that's a blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've had clients come back to me that I'm no longer coaching anymore, even years later, and say, you were right about that. You were absolutely right. This big thing happened and my entire family was wrecked by it, but I was present. I was calm. I handled it better than anybody else because of what we've gone through. And those tools that we grow inside of us, they become part of our inner self. They are part of our core, right? They are our inner strengths.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, things come up, but I feel like I have so many tools to use to work through it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's such a good thing to point out. That's why I asked, because it's like even if we heal stuff that's chronic, that doesn't mean that acute things never happen. Because like you said, stress happens, life happens, emotions happen. And
Yes.
we're mind, body creatures. We're emotional beings. So
yeah,
it's not uncommon for things to, still show up. But then it's nice to know that we have these beautiful tools and this awareness where we can transcend them and not allow it to become a chronic thing again.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. I love the way you just phrased that. That's exactly it.
So, science of brain retraining. What are some of the things that really stood out to you that you really needed to carry in the forefront that helps you through this journey?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to break it down in the way that I would break it down for a brand new client, to really look at our brain and body from a bird's eye view. So take yourself outside of your body, look at the brain from a bird's eye view, and think about it just as observationally and not from within the emotional self. So let's let's take the brain and we're going to split it into two, and that's it. We're just going to look at it as having two components. We're not going to look at like the million different parts of the brain. So we look at the limbic system and we look at the prefrontal cortex. So the limbic system being that archaic, very primal part of the brain, the part of the brain that's in charge of the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, find response. And then the prefrontal cortex, which is who we identify ourselves with, right? The creative thinking, the critical thinking, the analyzing part of the brain. So we look at those two parts of the brain and they function very differently. The limbic system is survival. The prefrontal cortex is, I'm going to go and live in the world. So the limbic system stopped evolving hundreds of thousands of years ago. It stopped evolving. Think about that, how old that part of the brain is. That's why they call it that archaic brain. It's that old. And the prefrontal cortex is still evolving. So the two work very differently, yet they are communicating with one another all day, every day. The hunter and gatherer brain wants to protect. The prefrontal cortex wants to explore and be creative and live freely. And that's great. They do work side by side symbiotically, and they can for an entire lifetime. But if a person has a great deal of stress and trauma over long periods of time, that's when we run into challenges. And like I was saying before, with how between the ages of like 8 and my mid-20s, I had kind of fluctuations in how my nervous system would respond in life. There were times where I felt really great, and then times where I had anxiety and like I was showing signs of having OCD. That was my limbic system, my nervous system wanting more control, thinking it needed to protect me. So it happens that the limbic system over long periods of time of stress and trauma, let me back up and say really quickly that the limbic system doesn't understand emotional trauma like we experience with our prefrontal cortex. There's so much that happens today that didn't happen when we were hunters and gatherers. That's why I always take the science back to the hunter and gatherer brain, because today we've got, I don't need to name them all, but money issues, relationship stress, a car accident happens. Like so many things can happen in our lives that were not present during the time when the limbic system last evolved. So because the limbic system doesn't understand the emotional traumas, the limbic system can end up feeling overwhelmed by them and feeling like it no longer has the ability to cope with all of the trauma that it's experiencing, and all the stressors that it's experiencing. So it ends up finding its best way to cope. At first, it's when we start noticing like the worries, the nervousness, the anxiety, the looping thoughts. That's the limbic system communicating with us. Now, you and I would notice that if we were going through a stressful time, we would notice that like, oh, wait, I can hear my limbic system like, oh, it just thought that same thought over and over again. Oh, that means it's feeling stressed. Okay, I know exactly what to do. But when we've never gone through any kind of nervous system imbalance, we don't have that understanding, right? We don't have that knowledge. So we hear those things, but they don't resonate with us in a way that makes us feel like we need to do something about it. Some people do, and oh my goodness, if I could have when I was young, if I could have understood my brain when I was young, that would be incredible. But most of us get to a point where our limbic system is no longer able to cope, and then it does its best job to try and cope. So if we think about the limbic system back when we were hunting and gathering, the limbic system doesn't want to forget when something really big and emotional happens. So let's say we walk by a snake den and there's snakes in there. We know that they're scary, right? We're evolved enough to know that we should stay away from them. So that makes a mark on our brain that the limbic system doesn't want to forget about that. So it doesn't. So anytime we go near that cave, the limbic system is going to set off the alarm bells. It's going to want us to run away. Nowadays, there's snake caves everywhere if we let stress and trauma, etc., affect us like all day or for weeks or for months or for years. So the limbic system does its best job to cope, and that is by using its 5 senses to detect what's around us. And this is where all of our sensitivities come from. It's the limbic system trying to figure out what's causing us this emotional stress and trauma that we don't understand, or that it doesn't understand. We understand it, but the limbic system doesn't. And I think that's where a lot of confusion comes from too, because we think we're understanding what's happening in our lives, but because the limbic system and the nervous system don't understand, there's that really deep confusion. And so the limbic system's looking to the environment. What do I detect? What do I smell? What do I see? What's around me frequently, or what happened? What did I smell during a really scary, stressful experience? What did I hear during that time? And so that's why everybody has such different expressions of a limbic system, nervous system imbalance, because we all went through different experiences. We were all stressed for different reasons during different times around different stimuli. And so the limbic system looks to the environment and it picks out what it thinks could be causing us that stress and trauma and creates sensitivities to those things, because now it has a way to protect us. Now it has a way to control us. Now it has a way to keep us away from the snake dens. So that's the way that I always explain it to my clients. And I think it's really important to pull yourself out of your own personal experiences and think about what it looks like from that primal brain and why our brain is doing what it's doing today. And so when I was talking before about how I used that knowledge, I took that knowledge with me everywhere. And I would notice my brain being hypersensitized to something. And I would go, hold on a second. This is why it's happening. And I would explain it all to myself, even though I had probably explained it to myself 50,000 times. I would explain it in that specific circumstance so that I wasn't afraid, right? Because fear adds so much extra stress to the looping thoughts and the anxiety and the overall condition of the limbic system. So if we can find ourselves in those moments where we're feeling triggered, afraid, anxious, and instead say, I know what's happening and I know why. Hold on, limbic system, listen. This is why it's happening. Then we remove the fear. And we can really observe then if we're not afraid. So that is what I took with me everywhere. And hopefully others are doing the same thing. But if you're not, please do. It's so important.
That is a really awesome explanation. I have to say it's the first time I've heard it explained that way. So that was really awesome.
Okay.
And you would explain this to yourself, even if it was like the 100th time you've explained it to yourself. Would you still keep yourself in the stimuli that may have been causing your limbic system to react, or would you remove yourself?
Yeah. So it really depends, or it really depended. So the way that I would look at it and the way I coach is you have to look at the big picture. So if we really were to break down how we heal from something like this, or how we rebalance ourselves from something like this, the basic idea is that we communicate to the limbic system and the nervous system that everything is okay. We have to guide, we have to teach, we have to hold the hands of the nervous system and the limbic system and say, everything's okay, I promise you. And that takes different amounts of time for each stimuli that you're in the presence of, right? For some, like with chemical sensitivities, for example, that was my big thing. That I had more fear around that than anything else. Whereas something like an electromagnetic sensitivity, I didn't care about that. But I have clients who have so much fear of the EHS and like no fear of MCS. So really, every single stimuli is going to have, we're going to have different relationships with every single one that we have sensitivities to. Sometimes we care, sometimes we don't at all. So when I say that we need to communicate to the limbic system that everything's okay, we have to think of that in each situation that we are in. So if I went out and I was with a group of people and they were wearing perfume and it really was triggering me, and I felt like, you know what? I am having a really hard time elevating my mood right now. I'm having a really hard time being present. I'm feeling triggered, but it's to the point where like I'm uncomfortable with even being uncomfortable. I used to be able to find comfort even in the discomfort by elevating my mood, being present in conversations, thinking of something like a project that I had, like we were talking about earlier. I would do these huge photo shoots with my nieces, and that's what I always would think about, the details of, oh, what color shoe do I need to buy for the next one, like little details like that. So we have so many tools that we can use in the situations where we're feeling triggered, and I would use all of my tools. But if I felt like my nervous system was just like too activated in that moment, I would say, you know what? It's okay. You can go home. It's all right. There's no shame in that. There's only pride that you should feel for meeting yourself where you're at and not running away from the scenario and not looking at it as running away, not looking at it as avoiding, looking at it as, I did my best, but right now it's a little too much for me. So I'm going to go home, and you know what? I'll go out next time and I'll try it again, because maybe my nervous system next time will be feeling more resilient, and that'll be a really great learning and growing experience. So I forget what your original question was. Do you remember exactly what it was?
Yeah, no, you were answering it.
Okay,
totally.
good.
I was basically just asking how you decide, like, depending on the stimuli, like if you would stay in
Or
it or
leave.
remove yourself.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
awesome. And I love that you mentioned like that you might go home, but you just would be like, but I'm going to try again next time because maybe I'll feel more resilient, because there's a truth that our resilience, I mean, you explained it even from your 8 years old to 20 something, that this resilience level is kind of shifting day to day.
Yeah.
So while one day it might be you might be more activated, another day you might actually have better chance of essentially like incremental training or having that exposure therapy without such a strong reaction.
Yeah, exactly. And there's times where there's just a lot going on in life. Like maybe you and your partner are not really getting along right now, so you're feeling a little bit more emotional, and those are the times where the nervous system might have a little less resilience. So maybe you do go out and you're with a group of friends, but you're noticing that your nervous system is speaking to you and is saying, I don't believe everything's okay right now. And so you would try your best to say, it's okay. Like, we're here, we're in this present moment. That's all we need, right? You try all your tools. You can go and, do a round, as some programs would call it, in the bathroom, or do a visualization, or, whatever works to calm you. You could try all of those things. But at the end of the day, we have to meet ourselves where we're at, and we have to honor where our limbic system is and not run away. Like I said, I want to make sure that we're really specifying that we don't want to run, and we don't want to make the limbic system think that we're afraid. And it's okay. It's okay to leave. I have clients asking me, like, is it okay to leave somewhere if I'm triggered, or am I telling the limbic system that it's not safe? Well, you're only telling the limbic system it's not safe if you tell the limbic system it's not safe, right? Like, if you're saying it's okay, like you said to me earlier, you can leave if you want to, and how healthy that is. If you do that, then you're doing the healthiest thing for your limbic system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's about your perception and your mindset when you're making that conscious choice to leave.
Yeah.
It's a very different if you're like, oh my gosh, this is, if you go into that, oh my gosh, this isn't okay, this isn't good, blah, blah, blah. I got to get out of here kind of thing versus like, okay, I get it. You're feeling a little bit more sensitive today. This is okay. It's safe, but we're going to go ahead and honor what you need right now. And we're going to try again later.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
So ultimately, if you were somewhere and you weren't feeling any fear consciously, but you were still having like a symptom response, that's how you would know that it might be a better thing to like support yourself by removing yourself from said situation and trying again another day.
If that symptom was so triggering to you that you felt you couldn't stay and handle having that symptom in a healthy way. But if you have no fear, but you're having symptoms, stay. It's okay. Those symptoms aren't doing anything to you. That's the limbic system saying it's not okay, it's not okay, it's not okay. But our prefrontal cortex, I think that this is a really important point to make. So the prefrontal cortex is always going to trump the limbic system. And I think that we lose sight of that the limbic system is in control when we have an imbalance, in a sense. It's the one that's sending the fear messages and the stress chemicals and all of that. But the prefrontal cortex is the one that gets to make the choice, right? The prefrontal cortex gets to say, it's okay. We are okay in this moment in time. So if the prefrontal cortex is calm, but the body is symptomatic, then stay and enjoy. But you need to be able to handle that symptom in a way that doesn't then communicate back to the limbic system that everything is not okay. Like I was saying, finding calm and comfort in the discomfort, let it be uncomfortable. It's not doing anything to you. Actually, in those moments, you are sending a really clear message to the limbic system that everything is okay because you're sitting or standing or interacting. And even though the limbic system's communicating to you, you're communicating back with feel-good chemicals, with being in the present moment, with elevating your mood. And that is how we guide the limbic system to, hey, we don't need those symptoms. Everything's okay here, you see? It's when we send fear back that then we would want to say, you know what, I think it's time to go home because we're not communicating well with the limbic system right now. And she or he is going to feel afraid. So
okay, this makes so much sense. So I want to give an example of something I've experienced, and just because I know people listening love examples, and you could maybe speak to it or affirm or correct me. So one of my sensitivities that obviously I've gotten exponentially better with is to light, specifically sunlight or sunlight's the biggest thing because I don't want to be around LEDs or any of that anyway, so that doesn't affect me, but I love sunshine and going outside and being in nature. And I used to live in sunglasses and hats and still have some struggles, but now it's been so interesting. I've gotten to a point where I can in the mornings, I never even wear sunglasses or hats anymore. And maybe if I go out during the middle of the day, I might put a ball cap on, but I never wear sunglasses, right? And that's awesome. Huge progress. But there's, every once in a great while, there's a random day where I guess my limbic system says, hey, not today, not today. And what I've noticed is, sometimes I'm like, okay, well, I just want you to know the sunshine's totally normal and it's healthy and it's healing and it's good for me. But I respect you. I understand where you're at today. And I'm just going to put these sunnies for sunglasses. And we're just going to go about our day because I really want this walk on the beach right now. And that's kind of what I've been doing so that I have that conversation so that my brain knows we don't need these sunglasses, but we're going to wear them today because I understand we're just operating a little different. So is
Yeah.
that doing what you're saying in a sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. 'Cause I think in that moment, you are allowing the sensitivity to be there. You're okay with it being there. In a way, you're surrendering to it, right? You're like, you're here. It's okay. I know you're not doing anything to me. I'm not fearing you. I know why you're here. And yeah, we're just, if we need to like put on the sunglasses today, that's okay. No big deal. Like, we won't need to tomorrow or the next day. So I think you're absolutely doing the right thing. I would add to that, um, when your limbic system randomly has symptoms like that, you want to immediately communicate that everything is okay. So I don't know, maybe you are already doing this, but as soon as you notice that your nervous system's reacting to that stimuli, immediately smile.
Mm-hmm.
Smile, and then release, like shake out your body and release any tension in your body, because sometimes we don't notice it, but we're like hold tension in our fists or in our faces, and we want to release all of that, because in those moments, those are really teachable moments. Those are moments where we can really use those moments to say, hey, limbic system, look, we're smiling right now. We are just like a sun goddess. It's beautiful outside. I'm so happy. And see the body, like the body can communicate really quickly to the brain that everything's not okay, right? Because if we have our fists clenched, then that would communicate that we need to fight. So release any tension. I used to hold tension in my thighs, which is kind of a weird place, but I think we all do it so differently. So release that, like let your body just be so calm and relaxed. Then you know you're doing everything, and then going even above and beyond to communicate everything is wonderful right now, limbic system. So it sounds like you're doing, everything you can, but if you're not smiling and releasing body tension and then thinking of things you're grateful for and just living in that moment for a minute, even with like the discomfort in your body, do that, right? Like lift yourself out of even thinking about that, because if you have the science of why your brain's doing that, then you can observe it and not be affected by it, and you can smile, right? And you can find real joy because you're using that science to inform your decisions, and you feel such an empowerment when you do that.
Yeah, and it's such a different response than if you have a moment where you haven't had a sensitivity for like a couple months, and all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like,
Yeah.
If you're like freaking out and, oh my God, what did I do? What happened? Why is this happening again? And you start thinking it's going to be permanent again. I mean, that's such a different message you're
Oh
sending.
my gosh, it's such a different message. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned many times so far in the conversation already, limbic system and nervous system interchangeably. Is this something
Yeah.
that you do use interchangeably? Are they the
Sometimes
same?
sometimes I do use them interchangeably, but really I shouldn't, because the nervous system is so much more of like a vast system in the body. And then the limbic system is specifically like the amygdala, the hippocampus, the hypothalamus. So I shouldn't use them interchangeably, and I'm trying to get better at not. But when I shifted out of working for DNRS, I really started to look at more about the nervous system and not so much the limbic system. So when I coach, I typically talk more about the nervous system in general, and then when I do talks like this, I'll say limbic system more often than I probably should. So that's probably why I'm using them more interchangeably. I should probably be more mindful of that. Thank you for bringing
Oh
that
no,
to my
it's okay.
attention.
I just wanted to know if it was in the terms of that you were explaining it interchangeable
Yeah.
or not. And so when you talk about communicating with the limbic system, essentially then is that interchangeable? Like, are we essentially able to communicate to our whole nervous system?
Yeah.
Okay. That's where we're really doing what you've already
Yeah.
explained, right? When we're
Mm.
choosing to smile, when we're
Yeah.
choosing to shake out the tension, that is
Yeah.
communicating on a broader scale to the whole
Yes.
nervous system.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, exactly. Yeah, so I would think of like a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square.
Got it.
Kind of a thing.
Yep.
So yeah, exactly. When we're releasing that body tension and thinking more about the whole self, then we're thinking more in terms of the entire nervous system.
Gotcha. Okay, so regarding the limbic system and the nervous system, I was curious if somebody who has like a limbic system imbalance automatically has dysregulation in the nervous system or how they correlate.
Mm. So, if somebody has dysregulation in the limbic system, does that mean that they have an imbalanced nervous system? That's the question.
Hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say yes because the limbic system being at like the center of the protective mechanism in the brain, if that is imbalanced or dysregulated, then the entire nervous system is going to be out of balance. The nervous system is going to be communicating back to the brain that there are threats when there are not, and the brain communicating to the nervous system the same thing. So they're very much in sync with one another when there is when there's the belief that there is a threat.
Gotcha.
Mm.
And so what do we when you see this happening, what do we address first? Do we begin by addressing to balance the limbic system or do we go broader and go straight to the nervous system?
Mm. I think that we go broader and we go straight to the nervous system. Now, the thing is that depending on what program you're a part of or what research you've done, you might think more in terms of limbic system. So I think within this particular question, however you look at it is fine. But I think it's important that you learn how to communicate with whether you call it your nervous system, your limbic system, or both, or you come up with a different name. Like I have clients who have come up with just names or animal representations of their nervous system / their limbic system. So however you want to talk about it, you need to learn how to communicate with the nervous system as a whole to be able to teach the nervous system that everything is okay. So I think to answer your question, you would want to think about it in a broad sense if you can, because then you're thinking of more of like the body as a whole and not just the brain. But either way, I think you're going to basically be doing the same thing.
Mhm. And what would that thing be in general?
Okay. So, I mean, I could answer that question in so many different ways, and I'm going to take it down this road of learning how to communicate in the most healthy way with
Okay.
I'm just going to say nervous system in general.
Okay.
So there are 3 parts, and I've come up with this method over many years of just listening to my clients and what their nervous systems are saying, and then in ways that I would say you need to communicate to your nervous system that this thing. And I kind of just noticed a lot of different themes, and I came to the conclusion that this was the healthiest way, and I've seen it really transform my clients' healing. So I hope that whoever is listening will take something out of it. So the 3 parts. The first part is labeling negative feelings. So I know that some programs say basically run away from negative feelings. Don't entertain them, ignore them, try and prune them away. And that can be true. Sometimes we just want to prune away and get rid of negative thinking and negative feelings. But I don't know if this is true for you, but it was definitely true for me, and it's true for mostly all of my clients. These negative feelings can just kind of they exist for such long periods of time. And to me, I started thinking, oh my gosh, our nervous systems want to be heard. They don't want to be told no. And I've heard that so much from my clients. Like, it feels like I am lying to myself, or it feels like I'm pushing myself away. It feels like I'm not honoring myself. So I read this article, and I can send it to you so you can post it in the podcast. Or I'm not very good with technology, so I'm sure you can do that somehow. So I read an article about labeling negative feelings, and it said, and it gave all this scientific research and that they did at this university, and they compared two groups of people. One group of people they did brain scans of who were looking at pictures of people who were sad and angry, et cetera, and they did brain scans of those people, and they showed the amygdala activity, and the amygdala just blew up. And then they did scans of people who were looking at those same pictures, but labeling the emotions. That's sad. That person's feeling mad. That person's angry. And they showed the amygdala activity in the brain scans, and it was so much lower, like almost to the point where it was like non-existent. So that said to me, we need to be labeling our negative feelings because that decreases activity in the amygdala. So if you have negative feelings that are sticking around, which most of us have in this place of nervous system imbalance, label those negative feelings, and you don't spend a lot of time on it. It's like it's a quick thing, but it's a release. It's like, I'm mad right now. I'm mad. You can say it a bunch of times in a row and just kind of get it out. And then, because the limbic system really wants to be heard, validate that in yourself. The nervous system wants you to say, I'm mad because, but we don't want to perseverate on this. We just want to say it, say what it is. And then it's okay that you're mad, or of course you would feel mad, or it would be normal that you're mad right now. It's okay, right? Let it be okay that that emotion is there. And I think that, it really goes well with like a lot of what like a Buddhist would say, which is like, let your emotions be. Don't judge them. Don't push them away, right? Let them be okay. And this is a way that we can become okay with our emotions instead of saying, no, go away. We don't want you. It's like, no, it's okay that you're here. Of course you would feel this way. This is very normal. But then the third part is to create a different story or outlook or perspective. And this is so important because this is the big but. It's like, I'm mad. It's okay that you're mad, but, and this is where you want to spend your energy, your time, your emotion, and your attention. Because whatever we spend energy, time, emotion, and attention on is going to impact the nervous system more than anything else, because the nervous system is built to understand what we put emotion towards, right? That's why when something really stressful happens or something traumatic happens, then the nervous system remembers that because we pour so much emotion into it, and time and energy and attention. So think about that when you give your limbic system this third part, this but. This but part needs to have, all of the emotion into it. So you are wanting to create a different story here. It's like, but I know this is just a moment in time. But you're only mad right now. Listen, I get it. You're mad. It's okay that you're mad. But do you really want to spend time on being mad? Or do you want to spend time on healing yourself, rebalancing yourself, smiling, thinking about what you're grateful for? And I find that because my clients have such deep emotions of, anger coming from the past, sadness, or whatever it may be, when we stop and we say, I hear you. This is sadness. Of course you would feel this sadness, but then you give that big but part and you create a different story, that because you're labeling and you're validating, you're actually able to observe those thoughts instead of just being all wrapped up in them, right? You can really observe them and you can see them differently than you had when you were wrapped up in them and you couldn't think outside of them. Now you're able to be self-reflective and self-aware, and you're able to give yourself some wisdom, because when you do this, you're also taking yourself out of your protective brain. You're taking yourself out of that very emotional, part of you, and the limbic system's in charge of your emotion regulation. So you're all, when you're all mad and scared and whatever that deep emotion is, you're in your limbic brain. So when you label and validate, then you're kind of you're allowing the limbic system stress to dissipate, and you create this different story, and you're really able to give yourself a different way, a different outlook. Does that all make sense? Did I explain that thoroughly?
Yes. Yes. And as you're saying that, I think a lot about inner child healing, because you're saying the nervous system wants to be validated.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like a lot of what I've learned over the years, like studying like inner child healing work. It's like, it's just allowing that inner child to have a voice, that their feelings matter. And often we get so scared of these quote unquote negative feelings. Somebody on my show once said she calls them depleting or renewing emotions rather than negative or positive.
I like that.
Yeah. And I always try to remind myself that. And so when we feel the problem becomes when we start to label these, like not label, but judge these emotions as bad, or we start to fear them, or we start to judge ourselves that we are not a good person, or we're a bad person, or we feel shame for having these feelings that are all part of the human experience. And it's when we actually just like allow that voice, it actually, like, it's like, oh, okay, I just needed to be heard. That's it. Like, I'm good now. And then you get to step into that prefrontal cortex again. And that's where you get to like, okay, now what are we gonna do different? What's next?
Yes.
Like, okay, I see how you're really angry with that. Could we look at something this way? Like, but it's not disvaluing the feeling.
It's not invalidating it. It's absolutely saying, I hear you, but let's look at a different angle instead, because why are we going to sit here with this and perseverate on it? Let's not.
So it's kind of also like when you look at the part systems, it's like giving the different parts of you the voice and like validation, and then stepping back into your like authentic true self.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. Yeah, I love how you said that. When you were talking about what another speaker had said about negative or positive feelings, I was thinking about how I was kind of coming up with my own terminology, and I was thinking, instead of saying label negative feelings, to maybe say label uncomfortable feelings, right? Like they're not negative, but it's uncomfortable until we become comfortable with it. Then it's a comfortable feeling. Even, being frustrated can become a comfortable feeling that can just pass right through us over time. So I might shift that to uncomfortable instead.
I like that. And something that I did in my retraining, not right away, after like about a year, I actually really started to do expressive writing as a form of incrementally training my emotions, because I wanted to teach my nervous system that these possibly repressed, uncomfortable emotions weren't scary. They weren't threatening, because just the same that the limbic system can begin to perceive a smell as threatening, it can perceive certain emotions as threatening. Hence why it would want to like repress it, keep it down, because we can't let her feel that. That would be really scary, And so it's just another form of to me, it was just another form of incremental training, because the brain, the limbic part of the brain, like I said, just it can see certain emotions just as threatening as any smell or light or, food or anything else.
Absolutely. And there's, we don't have time today, but there are so many ways that we can communicate to the limbic system that, hey, these, past traumas or past stressful experiences, they feel really big and scary to you right now, but let's talk about how they don't need to anymore, and we can create a different relationship with them. And in that way, allow the limbic system to like release them and not have to hold on to them anymore. They're only held on to because they seem and feel so relevant still, because they're, you know, connected so much to our emotions and the way that we are in our world right now when we have an imbalanced nervous system. But we don't have to get too deep into that because I don't think we have time.
That sounds like a really fun topic, though.
It is. It's a meaty topic. It's great.
Okay, I like that one. That's definitely a new one for the podcast. We'll save that for another day.
Okay, good.
I do want to ask you, because I know there's a million things you could share. There's probably so much wonderful information that you've acquired over the years through practical, you know, application and through the experience of coaching and connecting with hundreds of people. But if you were going to just share one message today with the world and anyone listening, what would you want to share?
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay. I know. No, I like it, but there's so many.
I know, and I'm making you share one.
No, it's good. It's good. Okay. I would say, if you can walk through life thinking and informing your decisions based on this one thought, it should be, am I communicating to my limbic system that everything is okay? And if I am, amazing. If I'm not, it's okay. Because I have a choice and I can make that choice, and I can, you know, if I'm really stuck deep down in the yuckiness of the imbalanced nervous system, I can get myself out of there because I have so many tools too. And you can, you know, find your way to being able to communicate that everything is okay. And I'm sure all of your listeners have so many tools from so many different places. Write down your tools. That is something I didn't do. Can I change my answer? Write down your tools.
You can do both. We can have both.
Thank you.
There's no strict rules here.
Okay, good. So, no, this is just a little tip, but I never did this. And I tell my clients all the time, write them down, because there's so many different thoughts and ideas we have all throughout the day. I have clients coming back to me after a couple of months saying, you know, I'm stuck here. I don't know why I'm stuck. And so we kind of run through a couple of questions. And a lot of the time I come to the conclusion that you've lost just the very basics. You're forgetting the basics. That's it. So what worked for you in the past, and keep doing it. Don't forget about it. So write down your tools, have them with you, like on notes or whatever in your phone, or have them with you and carry them with you, because they guide you. And they guide you to be able to communicate to the limbic system that everything is okay.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you just brought this up about write down your tools. We're such busy bodies. Our brains are so busy. Our minds are so busy. And we are learning, especially when we're on this journey, we are learning so much, and we're filling our brains even more with great stuff. But generally the brain can only like keep so much in the forefront.
Yeah.
And then some things kind of get stuffed to the back.
Yeah.
And we can't always remember all of it all the time, but if we have that reference guide, it's like, oh yeah, that's right, I can do that. I love this. I did this as a fitness coach. I had all these boards, and I would write down for different purposes, like different movements. Because when I was doing programming for like an entire gym, there was no way that I could possibly remember all the exercises I knew and cycle them in. But if I made these big lists, then I could be like, okay, what's the objective with this movement? And then I'd look at that list and I'd have a whole like slew of options, and I could interchange them and not let some get like lost, at the bottom of the treasure chest.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you're busy at work and people are talking to you and you're with clients, you're not using, all of your prefrontal cortex. You're only able to use so much of it to think of that thing that you need to remember, right? That exercise you need to remember. It's the same with when you're, feeling like you're in your limbic brain. We're not able to access our prefrontal cortex as well. So it's like a physical representation of your prefrontal cortex. Here it is. You don't have to reach for it. You don't have to search for it. You don't have to look. It's right here, right? And I think that's so important. And as a last thought, don't feel pressured to use tools that don't work for you, right? Like if something doesn't work for you, it's okay to take it off the list, even if 10 of your friends feel like it's the best thing since sliced bread. Leave it. It's fine. It doesn't work for you. Every one of us are so different. We have different experiences, different passions, different loves. It's okay that we all are going to use different tools to heal.
Yeah, because it's not cookie cutter.
Absolutely.
Healing's not cookie cutter. We all came to the table. We all entered into our perfect storm with totally different lives, different traumas, different experiences, different upbringings, different nervous systems.
Yeah.
So we can't expect what worked for one person. We can't follow it to a T and expect it's going to be our saving grace.
No, we cannot. And if we do, we're putting pressure and stress on the whole system, right?
Yeah.
And then are we telling the limbic system everything is okay? Is that what we're communicating to it? No.
Right. Or the minute it's not working, we think we're doing it wrong because it's not working for us and it worked for them.
Right.
Yeah. That's another really good one.
Yeah.
And can I ask you one other quick question pertinent to that?
Yeah.
So, what is your thought on if a tool, like if you're, it's not so much, you don't know whether or not it's like so much working as much as it is, you just don't enjoy doing it. Like I've heard in my past from other coaches and people would say, oh, that's limbic resistance. That means you need to do it. And it's like, well, is it limbic resistance, or sometimes is it just like I genuinely don't enjoy this night and there's other things I enjoy more?
Yeah. I think you can try something for a couple of days, but if you feel like you're banging your head against the wall with it, there's so many other tools that you can use. Why force? Why add pressure and stress? There's just no need to. So actually one of my clients asked me that question yesterday. And so I think it's a very common misunderstanding, or it's hard to know because you do hear that term thrown around, limbic resistance. And I think if your limbic system is resisting something, but you consciously know that it's what's best for you, I think that we know if something's best for us. Like, for example, visualization and I just didn't really get along, or I just didn't find it as the most helpful tool for me. I liked to go and do things more. And so I didn't do a ton of visualization. I did more of just living my life. That's my way. So if I had listened to everybody else who said, you have to visualize, I would have been like, sitting in my house, forcing myself to visualize and not out in nature where I healed more. Yeah. So I think you listen within and that's another thing. This is a topic for another time. Trusting yourself, learning how to trust yourself in this process, which is, it's the voice that we lose because we're told by doctors, no, you're wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. So we start to question ourselves and we lose trust with ourselves. We lose trust in our bodies, right? You're not doing what I think you should do. You're supposed to be healthy, or we lose the trust with ourselves. So start to listen to that inner voice. We all have it, but we might have lost it for some time, and just say, do you consciously think and rationally and logically think that this would be a really good thing for you? If so, without, limbic interference, just answer that question with no pressure to do anything. Just answer it. And if you think it is the best thing for you, then take really tiny, like microscopic steps to do it. And don't make yourself sit there and meditate for, 20 minutes the first time. Just do 1 minute and see, because you think meditation is going to be the best thing for you. That's great. Start with 30 seconds even. And then you build up slowly and see if it really is resonating with you, if it really does feel good within you. But you can't force yourself to like do 20 minutes at first, because that's, I think, a lot of the time where there gets to be confusion. Is it resistance, or am I just, not there yet? Am I getting frustrated because it feels like I'm up against a wall right now? So I think that, you ask yourself, and if you think it would be best for you, then you try it little tiny little increments, and you don't put pressure on yourself at all. If anything, you do less than what you think you can do, because then you'll want to do more.
Yeah, I say it's creating wins. You set small goals and you create wins, because in creating these wins, you teach yourself that you're reliable, that you're capable, that it's possible. You start establishing that trust again that maybe you lost somewhere down, along the journey.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you can always do more. You can always have like extra credit.
Absolutely.
Or bonus.
Yeah.
But like, don't set this big goal that then you don't achieve, and then you beat yourself up and feel ashamed and feel guilty and think you're a bad person, or say you don't have willpower and you're not disciplined.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. That's such a big one.
Exactly.
And I love that you brought up like the visualization thing, because I definitely went through a period in my journey, having started out with DNRS myself also. And I feel like I was really coming into self and getting back to reacclimating with my authentic, like that true self, that voice, that intuition. And yet there was there was also this part of me that was this struggle of feeling that perfectionism that still was like, no, you need to do this right. This is how you have to do it, or it's not going to work. But I would want to like go be on a hike in nature, and I would feel this pressure, this like, well, you should sit down and do a round. And then the other part of me would be like, but I'm in nature and I just want to sit down and be present to it. Why do I have to like sit down and escape and visualize being somewhere else when I'm in the most beautiful place that I loved so much here and now,
Yes.
So I say this and share it with everyone listening, because I know that I'm not alone in that struggle.
Yeah.
We're often not alone. Generally, if we have a thought or a fear or feel a pressure or, something we're battling within, there's somebody else going through it too.
Absolutely. And I think neither one of us are saying that visualization isn't powerful. It is.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I just don't love it when I put pressure on myself to feel like I have to say no to living and being present in order to do it.
Yes.
But absolutely, I'm like, I am living proof for me. Like, I'm living a life that I spent my first year of DNRS visualizing.
Amazing.
And I'm like, oh, this is great. When you are inspired and you want, but not when you're like, now you get to go live life and you're like feeling guilty if you're not doing it.
Yeah. And if you never want to do it, that's fine too.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, I love that. There's so many great things we're talking about. How can people connect with you?
Okay, so when I started off coaching, like I said, about 1.5 years ago, I still haven't created a website yet, because I didn't have the capacity to get any bigger. So I am going to be expanding my hours soon, which is pretty wonderful. And so I can send you the link that clients can see, little information about what I do, and how to set up a coaching call with me if they would like to. And I could just send you that link. Does that work?
Yeah. Are you on social media at all?
Oh, yes. I'm on Instagram. Sometimes I forget about it. I need to get better.
No. Good.
I seriously didn't post on Instagram for like 2 months, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have Instagram. I need to do that. So Yes, I have an Instagram. It's Tessa_Malcarne.
I know there's so many more things that we could talk about, but do you have any final thoughts or anything else that you felt really called or inspired to share today that we didn't talk about yet?
I think if I start, I won't stop. And so I would like to say thank you, because this was such a wonderful conversation. It really was. I loved talking with you, and I am excited to hear this when it comes out.
Yay! Well, thanks for being here and sharing your
Yes.
wisdom and your experience.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That is a wrap. And as always, I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you had some insight or inspiration that you were needing right at this time. If you have any guest requests or you want to be a guest on the podcast, let me know and let's chat. P.S. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you haven't done it already, share this episode with someone that you know could benefit from the messages that Tessa shared today. And until next time, create a great week. I'm your host, HearthMath.